トビデオ
If you were to ask me which studio at this moment in time is doing the most in pushing the medium of animation forward, the answer is always going to be Studio Trigger. Permit this poor possum to gush about one of their favorite anime studios, but for real, I am dead serious that the studio with the most creative ambitions is Trigger. I was one of the lucky few who has been following them from their beginning 10 years ago when they rose from the ashes of Gainax. From their debut with the irreverent Inferno Cop to their first serious TV anime in Kill la Kill, it's amazing to see a studio go from small time to one of the most in-demand studios this side of the Pacific, being handed the reins of long-awaited anime adaptations and doing the work for franchises that range from Cyberpunk to goddamn Star Wars. And all while getting to work on their own projects on top of it. They aren't perfect. They've had their share of hiccups in their lifetime, of course. Would anybody like to remember when this was a thing? But there really is something inspiring about a studio that is allowed to produce so much big budget work while keeping the auteur spirit of the artist alive. But where did that creative philosophy come from? Where exactly was the seed from which the Trigger we all know and love sprouted from? It's not Kill la Kill, and it's certainly not Inferno Cop. No, we have to go back, way back, to the prehistoric time period of 2004. It is here you will find the film that laid out the blueprint for Trigger's design philosophy.
Hey, showtime.
Two renegades wake up naked on the planet Earth. They have no memory of their past aside from their names, Pandy and Retro. Pandy because...
that thing around your eye makes you look like a panda bear.
And Retro because...
And that retro TV on your head makes you look like an asshole.
With names exchanged, the two set off to civilization to search for food and clothes. This immediately evolves into one sick-ass crime spree.
Now how about some wheels?
I'm on it!
After a lengthy police chase where our two not-heroes show off their extra-human abilities, they are soon caught, arrested, and carted off to the ultra-maximum security prison known as Dead Leaves, located on the half-destroyed moon. There, Pandy and Retro experience prison life filled with tight straitjackets, forced labor, scheduled bowel movements, and a pair of murderous super mutant prison guards breaking faces for the slightest infractions.
777! Do the honors!
For such wild and crazy spirits like Pandy and Retro, this prison lifestyle just ain't their style, man. So they immediately stage a prison break that's for sure to end in a lot of bodies at the cost of freedom. But in the midst of all this, some of Pandy and Retro's memories have started to get jogged. Have they been here before? What is their connection to Dead Leaves? And who exactly is the shadowy warden that is observing all these events with a calm smirk on their face?
Let the games begin.
If I could name one of the most important animated films of the 2000s, both in terms of quality and impact, Dead Leaves is a title that I would put up there. While the American side of animated film outside of Pixar is kinda sorta flowing into a quality toilet, it is Japan that is picking up the slack for the medium, not only consistently putting out excellent boundary-pushing films, but also ushering forth the next generation of directors. Dead Leaves was one of those films, taking animation to a higher level culturally.
Oops, sorry about that.
It does this by being one of the absolute crassest, craziest, and downright rudest anime ever committed to the screen. Nothing but 50 minutes of cartoon violence, cursing, and filth. It's awesome. But just think, without an anime like Dead Leaves, there frankly is no Studio Trigger. No anime about half-naked schoolgirls fighting in their sentient school uniforms, no movies about himbo fireman trying to save his burning twink man crush, and certainly no Rebecca.
Fuck was that?
Strap in because we're going on a trip. This is a look at Dead Leaves and its overall importance to animation history. Dead Leaves is the product of the mind of a man that is long overdue for an appearance on this series.
プロデューサーの森下克実さんです。どうぞ拍手でお願いください。そして監督の今市宏之さんです。よろしくお願いいたします。
If you're going to talk about Trigger and its overall history, it's impossible not to mention its co-founder, Hiroyuki Imaishi, one of animation's most unique visionaries. A graduate of the Tama Art University with a degree in visual arts, Imaishi was an avid anime fan who strove to break into the industry. He wouldn't have to wait long since, right after getting his degree, he answered a job application from the anime studio Gainax, who were looking for new talent to assist in making their latest animated product, something called Neon Genesis Evangelion, whatever, it's not important. Imaishi spent most of his time at Gainax working under the mentorship of Kazuya Tsurumaki, an animator whose style specialized in smear-heavy kinetic movement, and definitely played an influence in Imaishi developing his own style, which he was currently refining, not just utilizing smears, but also cutting frames to create palpable impacts, a style that was more concerned with good movement over realistic detail. Soon, he would end up being given projects that allowed him to come into his own as both a storyboarder and a director. The first of these projects was 1990's KaiserBeamz, known as His and Her Circumstances in English. Being Hideaki Anno's anticipated follow-up to Evangelion, Imaishi storyboarded the first episode with Anno along with several others, one being the highly experimental 19th episode, which he also directed. Since KaiserBeamz was fraught with Evangelion-esque production difficulties, 3 of the 26 episodes were clip shows and Anno had abandoned production halfway through, budgetary restraints necessitated that episode 19 be animated using paper cutouts. A decision Imaishi gladly took part of in considering his love of experimental styles. While the result was, and still is, divisive, it did mark Imaishi as someone who was willing to be creatively daring. This trait would soon be seen in the second of these projects that was far more well received. In 2000's Fully Cooley, Imaishi served as both a key animator, storyboarder, and episode director for episodes 2 and 5. If you ever noticed a scene that felt exceptionally wacky even by Fully Cooley standards, it was usually Imaishi. Scenes like Haruka's gun battle with the Men in Black, the climax that references Daikon 4, and that scene in episode 1 where it just turns into a manga.
Fondling her yum-yums?
I told you, I'm not Taro!
Fondling her cupcakes?
Ah!
Who's this slut you're fooling around with? Huh? Huh?
Mamimi, we were down at the river!
Really, Mamimi?
I bet she does it like a weasel.
His work on Fully Cooley establishes that not only Imaishi is an animator that prioritizes good movement and cutting-edge direction, but also one that prioritizes a very important ingredient to his secret sauce: visual humor. Meanwhile, another character enters the story, Imaitoonz. Imaitoonz is a famous artist who was very much in demand from the commercial sector at this time. His unique style combined late 90s futurism with American comic and anime stylings with street graffiti flourishes. In layman's terms, making him a forerunner to the kinds of aesthetics that thrived in the early aughts.
Get now lemon sentry.
Can you believe this is from 1996? One advertisement piece he did in 1997 was a series of magazine ads promoting the Sega Saturn called Future Buster Pandian Retro. The crux of that advertisement was a 1 to 2 page comic of the two title characters causing general mayhem in between screen grabs of Sega Saturn games. Not as memorable as Sagata-san, but definitely still made an impression. Fast forward to the new millennium, and Imaitoonz decides to revisit the two funky creations he had and pitched them as a subject for a short film. He took this pitch to Production IG, who were immediately taken in by it and greenlit the project right away. And guess who they had in mind to direct it? In retrospect, 2004 is Imaishi's true breakout year, what with his work on Ray, Cutie Honey, and Die Buster. But Dead Leaves trumps above them all because it is his debut as an actual director heading up a project. Production IG really had a lot of faith in someone who was just making his first big leap into the director's chair. Production IG only really picked up Toonz' idea because they thought it would be a fun little side project that would ease the burden off the production staff in between their work on Oshi's Ghost in the Shell sequel. What they didn't know was that getting Imaishi involved in the first place changed the whole scope of the project.
I get to do whatever I want, and you will happily lay down your lives for me!
Piss off.
Now, even though I've been selling Dead Leaves as a strictly an Imaishi joint, I don't want to downplay Toonz' involvement here. He was the one who came up with the pitch, designed the main characters, and was with Imaishi the entire way through production. But even if this wasn't his idea from the start, Imaishi really ended up throwing himself into this project. He found a kindred creative spirit within Toonz' and was willing to put aside other big projects with Gainax to work on Dead Leaves. And it's all the better for it because Imaishi helped Toonz' vision come to life in ways I don't even think Toonz imagined was possible. In his original pitch concept, Toonz' designs for Pandian Retro were more in line with his style, more detailed comic-inspired characters and the like. But Imaishi, being an animator who prioritized movement over details, streamlined their designs. Because of this, the overall animation of Dead Leaves retains Toonz' comic book sensibilities while moving in ways that conforms to Imaishi's cartoonish direction. Imaishi's philosophy when directing this was that they could not bore the viewer for 1 single second of the film's 50-minute runtime. Whatever's going on screen has to be visually interesting. It accomplished this by using smears, frame cutting, creative camera angles, repetitions, a few long takes here and there, which this being animated was probably a self-imposed challenge, and active background action in what would normally be stodgy exposition scenes. But the best part about the animation direction being concerned more with movement over detail is that the film can have these moments of more economically minded animation, provided that it would look funnier that way. Why draw every single prisoner in an escape conga line when you can just draw them all as a singular tube that occasionally bleeds? Speaking of the prisoners, most of the supporting cast was designed by Imaishi. While he did share Toonz' comic book nature, you can also see that he took the cartoon design wisdom of old and animated them to shit, resulting in characters that can look intense and intimidating to absolutely ugly in the best way. Which brings us to the secret MVP of Dead Leaves, Drill Dick. The man who has a drill for a dick.
Should I kiss you first or just stick it in?
Do not distinguish between magic and art. This got a PG rating in Japan, by the way. Of course, Imaishi and Toonz' weren't the only ones doing the project. We gotta give credit to the staff surrounding this work. Imaishi placed a lot of trust in the animators that he specially selected for this project, to the point that he storyboarded scenes with said animators in mind and left the timing to them. The final result is superb work courtesy of animators like Takashi Koike, Nobutoshi Ogura, and Chikashi Kubata. We also have Hiromasa Ogura's art direction that adds to Dead Leaves' look and feel. They help give the space sci-fi setting a psychedelic, trippy look that looks suitable for the film's subject matter. But the backgrounds also help with the animation since their more abstract qualities allow for better space of movement for the characters. Once again, the strength of motion over detailed formalism. But we've talked so much about how the visuals keep things interesting in the film that we risk overlooking just how important the sound design is to making Dead Leaves true high art. Veteran sound designer Fusunobu Fujiyama was an important piece helping Imaishi's vision coming to life. Every sound effect needed matches up with what's happening on screen because the audience's attention needed to be kept at all times. Dead Leaves is a loud film, both from a visual and auditory standpoint.
They must have sent us here when they locked us away!
The reason why, in the face of the super futuristic setting, everybody's using guns with bullets instead of laser pistols is solely because the former just hits harder. And at the start of the prison riot, the alarm uses the same sound effect as a siren at the start of a basketball game. Imaishi said it was the signal that the game had begun. The film's score was provided not only by Fujiyama, but also producers Daisuke Asakura and Yoshihiro Ike. All three given the thankless task of whipping up a score that literally never stops for 50 minutes because, once again, Imaishi needs the audience's full undivided attention. And they put in the work giving Dead Leaves a distinct soundtrack that utilizes hip-hop style breakbeats, comical operatic arias,
Oh, for God's sake!
and, reserved specifically for the bathroom vacuum scene, snake charmer music.
Dude, the music does absolutely nothing.
It'll work.
No, it won't.
Yes, it will.
There's no way.
As for voice acting, you could go either sub or dub, especially for our main characters. For the Japanese side, you got Takako Honda and Kappei Yamaguchi playing Pandy and Retro. Honda specializes in playing badass women or women in positions of power with her authoritative, not impressed by anything contralto. It's a good voice role for a ball breaker like Pandy, who, despite playing straight man for most of the picture, is given flavor thanks to her overall bad attitude that you would normally only see in Hot Topic cashiers.
俺たち記憶を失う前はヤクザだったのか。さあ、それはどうだか。なるほどな。それでついつい悪いことして捕まっちまったってわけだ。まあね、悪党ではあるかも。
Kappei Yamaguchi almost doesn't need any introduction considering he's played so many weebs' first male crush over the years, but he really excels in comedic roles that require him to make a lot of whackety schmackety noises for comedic effect. A perfect fit for Retro considering his radioactive levels of zaniness.
よっしゃ、やろうだろ。走るぞ。このバイクのケツに捕まれ。
Yamaguchi was also given a lot of room to improvise, something you really see in the lead up to and climax of the sex scene between him and Pandy. Yeah, I forgot to mention that they totally do it, and it's a plot point. English dub has Amanda Wynn Lee and Jackson Lee in the roles. Amanda Wynn Lee doesn't really need an introduction considering her resume. Jackson Lee, on the other hand, might need one. He mostly does behind the camera work and nearly all of his voice roles are bit parts. His most famous role, aside from Retro, is Alba in Evangelion. And he's also Amanda's spouse, so thanks, unexpected stunt casting.
Beats me.
I could learn to like this.
Both of them do roughly the same job as their Japanese counterparts. Me personally though, I prefer Amanda's Pandy because her voice has more palpable disgust, and while Jackson does a good job, trying to match Kappei's manic energy as a voice actor is a lot more challenging than it looks. But the voice acting situation is still whatever works for you, and that's good enough. As for the actual story of the anime, some of you might have guessed that with an anime as visual as this one, any story might be seen as inessential. Maybe, but then again, maybe not. In Toonz' original pitch, he did imagine a much more serious story, and a lot of plot beats that were in his original pitch did make it into the final product. For example, Pandy and Retro being amnesiac spies for the prison years ago, and somehow being involved in the reason why the moon is shaped like it is. Oh wait, I just realized it's a dead leaf, huh? Other plot points in this pitch include Pandy and Retro freeing themselves through sexual intercourse, emphasized by Toonz as an essential scene, said intercourse resulting in Pandy getting pregnant, and the climax involving Warden Galactica wanting revenge on Pandy. And then Imaishi came in and, well, the tone changed.
Ew.
It's not like Imaishi didn't give a shit about the story. He and Toonz actually tinkered with the smaller details to ensure everything fit the characters. The reason why Pandy is the one character whom exposition is delivered to is because they know Retro is the type of character who couldn't give less than a shit about his past. But at the same time, a lot of the elements that would make for a more complete story end up underdeveloped or swept under the rug altogether. Most of what we learn about Pandy and Retro's past are told to us through brief still frames that last 2 seconds at most, and the primary expositor, Dr. Quack, is not only implied to be lying, but he also gets killed midway through his speech. And while we do know the main antagonist Galactica wants revenge on Pandy, the details of it are kind of fuzzy. The fact that she's presented as the only character taking the plot the least bit seriously is itself a joke, and even the main characters have to comment that they don't fully understand what her deal is.
You know, it's pretty damn funny that you and I actually joined together against your father.
Wait, so is that chick your daughter or your sister? This is insane!
The whole gist is that Galactica wants to get revenge on Pandy by recreating a twisted fairy tale involving caterpillars. Pandy responds by giving birth to Gun Baby, the baby made out of guns. We get an incredibly trippy climax sequence involving a giant caterpillar eating everything, Retro losing his human body, and Gun Baby aging an entire lifetime within 10 minutes. After which, Pandy and Retro get on a spaceship, comment about how that was a whole bunch of stuff that just happened, before crashing back down to Earth right where they had started. You might say something that there is something to be said about the cycle of death and rebirth, but still, our protagonists did not develop in any meaningful way. They learned nothing, and by achieving their goal of escaping prison, wound up in the same place they were at the beginning.
I mean, I know what happened 8 years ago. I just can't remember it myself.
Then again, if the story did take itself more seriously, would that really change anything? The story is not superfluous, but it is a lesser concern for Dead Leaves as a whole. It's only there to provide structure to the chaos, a means to travel from visual set piece to visual set piece. Imaishi and Toonz wanted to keep this anime as dead stupidly simple as they possibly could. Why waste time explaining something that's probably not gonna matter 30 seconds from now? And I'm totally cool with that. We're clearly meant to just sit back and enjoy the ride, so let's just enjoy the ride. So now that we've really nailed down why Dead Leaves works as an animated product, what about its place in history? What exactly makes it so important? Well, just look at it. Dead Leaves was critically lauded when it came out around the global art house and anime con circuit, but it definitely did divide some audiences with its bluntness, its wild style, and unsympathetic portrayal of its protagonist.
Yeah, well, I guess we are pretty evil.
Imaishi even got yelled at by an aggrieved American otaku at an anime expo panel just for having Pandy and Retro kill scores of cops throughout the picture. But I doubt Imaishi gave a shit about that because this was an anime for him. This is Imaishi finally getting to do what he has always wanted to do. He is in his element, and he is doing all of this by stressing the importance of animation's basic principles. It's a small miracle Dead Leaves got made and promoted when it did, because this was made in a time when anime, Production IG in particular, was in a deep love affair with merging animation with computer animation and cutting-edge technology. And while Dead Leaves has digital coloring, it's entirely hand-drawn. In his words, Imaishi wanted to keep the common basics, making the biggest animated film using the simplest animation 101 techniques. He did this because he, above all else, wanted to make this as easy to visually comprehend as possible. This is why, despite it looking so intricately complicated at first glance, the imagery of Dead Leaves is also easy to take in. Because he nailed down this philosophy in this film, he was able to carry it into future productions of his. You see it in Gurren Lagann, you see it in Panty and Stocking, you see it in Kill la Kill, and you even see it in Cyberpunk Edge Runners. Seemingly intricate animated set pieces, all built on the most basic shapes and principles. Instead of adding more lines, just add more pictures. When people watch Dead Leaves, they probably are gonna make a crack of, what kind of drugs were they on when they made this? Something Imaishi and Toonz comment on in their commentary.
But
really, the only drug they were on was autonomy. complete and total artistic autonomy. That and a couple of adult beverages.
普通の飲み屋で飲みながらもうかなり30分ぐらい飲んで結構酔っ払って
The DNA of every Imaishi project, and by extension every Trigger project, can be found in Dead Leaves. And thanks to Manga Entertainment promoting it heavily a decade ago because they wanted another blood, how privileged we are that this directorial debut ended up becoming such a cult hit right out of the gate. Its legacy has only gotten stronger with time. With that, I leave you with these inspiring words from Imaishi himself from a drunken commentary he did with Toons and Company for the DVD.
バカなんじゃないかと思われるぐらいデカデカと出す。長々と出すっていうのは。
長いですよね。
Words to live by for any artist.
Honey, nothing around here shocks me anymore.
Beam me up, beam me up.